The deeper the Germans penetrated Allied lines, the more their own deprivations were forced home to them.
Like a vision from the promised land, we are already in the English rest areas, a land flowing with milk and honey. Our men can hardly be distinguished from English soldiers. Every one wears at least a leather jerkin, a waterproof, either short or long. There's no doubt the army is looting with some zest.
On the 23rd of March, Ludendorff suddenly dreamed up a real objective, the city of Amiens. Amiens was a hub of the Allied railway system, the key junction between northern France and Paris. Amiens' loss would be a calamity for the Allies, as French General Ferdinand Foch realized.
We must fight in front of Amiens. We must fight where we are now. As we have not been able to stop the Germans on the Somme, we must now not retire a single inch.
The German Second Army set out for Amiens, but slowed and halted on the way. Rudolf Binding was sent to investigate.
Today, the advance of our infantry suddenly stopped near Albert. Nobody could understand why. Strange figures who looked like soldiers were making their way back out of town. Men carrying a bottle of wine under their arm and another in their hand. The advance was held up, and there was no means of getting it going again for hours.
The German troops had found French towns full of food and drink, in quantities and qualities they hadn't seen for years.
Whole divisions had entirely gorged themselves on food and liquor and failed to press the vital attack.
The Second Army had lost precious time and momentum. Here, outside Amiens on the 4th of April, a combined Australian and British force stopped the Germans. Ludendorff called off the Michael offensive. His lack of a strategic plan and the failure to supply his troops had squandered a priceless opportunity. His officers were now seriously concerned.
Ludendorff has totally lost his nerve. How will this war end? England is still unbeaten.
The physical exhaustion of the infantry was so great that finally the men could hardly fire their rifles. They let themselves be slowly wiped out, almost without caring.
Then Germany's greatest hero, Baron von Richthofen, was shot down behind British lines on the 21st of April, shortly after his 80th kill. The Allies buried him with full military honours. A British plane then flew over his headquarters, dropping a photograph of von Richthofen's grave. The Baron's was the most public German death, but he was one of over 230,000 casualties in just 1 month. Germany was running out of men, having failed to capitalize on Russia's withdrawal from the war. Germany had left 1.5 million troops on the Eastern Front, soaking up vital resources, food and transport. Germany's leaders were out of their depth, fighting what Ludendorff would later call a total war, but with the administrative structures and thinking of a small 19th century state. Now Ludendorff's nightmare unfolded. Germany had failed to achieve decisive victory before the Americans poured into France. 250,000 by March 1918. But General Pershing gave the Germans some breathing space by refusing to allow American troops to serve under British or French command.
America declared war independently of the Allies, and she must face it as soon as possible with a powerful army. The morale of our soldiers depends upon fighting under our own flag.
Pershing, obstinate and stupid, hankering after a great self-contained American army. Ridiculous.
What changed the situation was a radical reorganization of the Allied command structure. During the bleakest moments of the Michael Offensive, General Ferdinand Foch was appointed Allied Supreme Commander on the Western Front. If Pétain and Haig could take orders from him, so could Pershing. But the Americans went their own way over how to fight. Captain Christensen gave a training lecture to some of the newly arrived American troops.
I held forth, adding a few personal experiences and lessons. When I had ended, an old colonel, dressed more like a sheriff, said, "Gentlemen, I'd like yous all to accord the Scottish Major a hearty vote of thanks for his very interesting lecture." Then he shook his finger and went on, "But I'd have yous guys remember, the British have been trying these tactics for nearly 4 years, and they ain't done much damn good."
The Americans were raring to fight.
We all seemed to go crazy, for we gave a yell like a bunch of wild Indians and started down the hill running and cursing in the face of the machine gun fire. Men were falling on every side, but we kept going, yelling and firing as we went.
We threw hand grenades as if they had been baseballs. A boy next to me threw a hand grenade and hit a tree. It bounced back and exploded. We saw it just in time to hit the bottom of the trench and keep from getting killed.
By refusing to learn from the Allies, the Americans fought in 1918 the way the Allies had done in 1914, charging across open ground without adequate artillery support. German intelligence noted their inexperience from interrogation of prisoners.
The attacks were carried out with dash and recklessness. Regarding military matters, however, they show not the slightest interest. For example, most of them have never seen a map. They are not able to describe the villages and roads through which they marched.
The Americans had a lot to learn, but their presence gave the Allies a huge morale boost.
They looked larger than ordinary men. Their tall, straight figures were in vivid contrast to our undersized armies of pale recruits. I pressed forward with the others to watch the United States physically entering the war. So godlike, so magnificent, so splendidly unimpaired in comparison with the tired, nerve-racked men of the British Army. So these were our deliverers at last. And with the knowledge that we were not, after all, defeated, found myself beginning to cry.
The failure of the Michael Offensive further depressed German morale at home. Pacifism and defeatism now seeped through to the soldiers in the German rear.
Military transports, lanterns, windows from block stations and trains have been smashed by stone throwing. Troops standing on top of the wagons cut through telephone cables and signals. In other trains, brakes were tampered with, making it impossible to stop in time for signals and in stations. Also, wagons have been uncoupled.
Colonel Albrecht von Thaer became so worried about the state of the German army that he voiced his concerns to Hindenburg.
His soothing voice said, My dear Thea, while it may be the case that things recently have not gone so well for you, you must remember that you are talking about a front of 12 miles. I daily receive reports from the entire front. Morale is splendid, while according to our reports, enemy morale is rather poor.
But morale in Hindenburg's own headquarters was sliding, and the root cause was Ludendorff. By July 1918, his nerves were shot. He'd only had 3 days off in 4 years. His beloved stepson had been killed in the Michael offensive. Ludendorff became morbidly attached to the boy's body, refusing to send it back to his wife in Berlin.
If I didn't send you Pichien, then that was pure selfishness. I wanted to keep him. I go to him often. It's a lovely feeling to have him here.
Ludendorff's inner circle feared for his mental health.
There's a serious question about Ludendorff's nervousness and his incoherence. He's working himself to death. The situation is really serious. It looks as if he's lost all hope.
Throughout June, the Germans grew weaker and the Allies stronger. On the 15th of July, Ludendorff launched the last German offensive of the First World War.
I have lived through the most disheartening day of the whole war. The French deliberately lured us across rusty snakes of barbed wire. We only managed to advance about 3 kilometers. Everything seemed to go wrong.
Then the French struck back at the Marne. Their counteroffensive battered the exhausted German army.
It looks as though we are being thrown against the largest enemy counteroffensive of all time, and it was supposed to be our offensive. We could never have dreamt that this would happen, ever.
Germany had suffered nearly 1 million casualties since the glory days of March. Her great gamble had failed, and the tables were turning against her.